For this video, there's going to be sources in the comments. So if you would like to look at any of the research that I have taken a look at and gathered for the making of this video, they will be in the comments and they will be linked. Viewer discretion for this video is advised. These are some sensitive topics. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video, we're going to be talking about child labor, specifically companies participating in child labor and just how bad really is it. People cannot agree on how bad it is when big companies are linked to child labor in their supply chains. Some say it is a harsh but necessary part of their development that gives poor families income and brings jobs to places that have almost nothing else. Others see it as straight up exploitation, so brands can sell cheap chocolate, clothes, and phones while kids swing machetes or crawl into machines. This isn't really about good versus bad, it's about how the global system works and who ends up getting helped or hurt. By the end, you'll see why some people will land on different sides of this and which side you might lean toward. For defenders, the key argument is survival. In many low-income countries, sending a child to work is a way for the family to eat this week, not a weird lifestyle choice. Organizations like the UNICEF note that when families are in extreme poverty and schools are weak or far away, work becomes a survival strategy rather than some evil plan. You might notice this logic when people say if that job disappears, those kids will starve, not suddenly go to a great school. Another pro-side argument is about how global supply chains are supposed to work. Companies buy cocoa, cotton, mica, or other raw materials from thousands of small farms and informal mines, where most work is technically done by family members, including children. Supporters say the company's money flows into poor regions, boosts local economies, and can eventually fund better roads, schools, and hospitals. You might notice this in corporate reports bragging about supporting smallholder farmers or creating economic opportunity in rural areas. There is also the developmental ladder argument. The idea is that rich countries once had child labor during their own industrial revolutions, and as they got richer, children moved from factories into schools. People who buy this view today's child labor in poorer countries is part of the same messy phase, and cutting off corporate buyers too fast could make things worse before it gets better. You might notice this when somebody argues, fix poverty first, then you won't need a 12-year-old on a farm. A concrete example often used in this context is cash transfer programs. Recent UNICEF and other research shows that when governments give poor families direct cash support, fewer children have to work and more stay in school, because the family is no longer completely dependent on every small income source. People who defend companies say, look, the real issue is weak social protection. Companies cannot replace the state. They argue that if governments and donors scale up these programs, child labor can drop even while companies keep buying from those regions. You might notice this when someone focuses more on public policy than on boycotting brands. Now let's flip the situation. Critics point out that this is not a small edge case issue. It is massive. As of 2020, an estimated 160 million children worldwide were in child labor, with about 79 million in work considered hazardous to their health or safety. You might notice how big that number is when you realize it is roughly 1 in 10 children on the planet. The It's Just Family Farm helpline also breaks down pretty fast. Global estimates show that about 70% of child labor is in agriculture, and much of it involves carrying heavy loads and using sharp tools or handling pesticides that can seriously harm kids. In industries like cocoa, investigators have documented children working long hours with machetes or chainsaws, sometimes starting before sunrise and finishing at dusk. You might notice a gap between helping on farm and doing dangerous full-time work when you see photos of kids carrying sacks bigger than they are. Then there is the corporate angle. Research and investigations have repeatedly found child labor in the supply chains of major chocolate companies and other global brands. Even after years of public promises to fix it, in cocoa, for example, more than 1.5 million children work on farms in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, which supply a large share of the world's cocoa, and many do hazardous tasks like carrying heavy loads or using dangerous tools. You might notice how strange it is to see glossy ads about sustainable chocolate next to reports of kids getting hurt harvesting the beans. One verified case shows how real this gets. In 2023, the Corporate Accountability Lab documented children doing hazardous work on cocoa farms that supply big food companies like Nestle, Mars, and Ferrero, earning less than the World Bank's poverty line and missing school. In 2024, a Brazilian court ordered agribusiness giant Cargill to do human rights due diligence and fined it for buying cocoa from farms that use child labor. These cases show that the problem is not just faraway poverty, but a system where low prices and weak oversight push producers towards using kids as cheap labor. You might notice how rarely these legal cases make it into the marketing videos. So, how can two different people look at the same facts and still end up arguing with each other? One big reason is different core values. If you care most about absolute, non negotiable rights, like no child should be in hazardous work or school comes first, then any corporate link to child labor can feel morally unacceptable, no matter the economic story. If you care more about survival and economic growth in the short term, you may accept ugly trade offs, at least for now. Experiences also shape views. Someone who grew up in poverty and worked as a child might say, "My job kept my family alive." You have no idea what hunger feels like. And they may see Western outrage as naive or hypocritical. Someone who has seen children injured in mines or trafficked to farms will have zero patience for talk about developmental phases or family choices. You might notice this difference when online debates turn into "you don't understand our reality" versus "you're excusing exploitation." Priorities about responsibility are different too. If you think multinational companies have huge power and resources, you'd probably expect them to pay higher prices, audit their suppliers hard, and refuse to buy from anyone using kids, even if that cuts profits. If you think governments and local elites are mainly to blame, you might argue that companies can only do so much inside broken systems, and the real fix is better schools, social protection, and local enforcement. You might notice this when one side demands brand boycotts while the other talks about policy reform and gradual change. Finally, people are reacting to different parts of the picture. One person sees a graph seeing hundreds of millions of children working and thinks this is an emergency and it has to be shut down. Another sees a case where harsh import bans wiped out a local industry and left families worse off and thinks rushing this can hurt the very kids we're trying to help. You might notice that both reactions are responding to something real, but they weigh the harms and risks differently. So, where does that leave you? The key question is what outcome matters most to you? Ending all child labor linked to brands as fast as possible, or avoiding sudden economic shocks that could hurt poor families in the short term? What trade off are you willing to accept? Slower progress with more safeguards, or faster crackdowns that might have rough side effects? You might want to look closer when a company's ethical sourcing claims don't line up with independent investigations, or when someone uses culture or tradition to excuse dangerous work for kids. You don't need someone online telling you exactly what to think. You just need to understand how the system works, who it helps, who it hurts, and then decide which costs you're willing to live with. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. If you enjoyed this video, and only if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, as it would help the channel so much. I hope you come back to watch another video, and goodbye.